Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 435 chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it won't start. Now when he brought it in, I saw that there was fuel running out of the muffler. And just now looking in the tank, I see that there's good smelling fuel in there. I didn't pressure test the line or anything, but I already suspect that it won't start due to the ignition system, because I got fuel coming all the way through the engine and out the muffler. So let's test this thing for spark. Now there, I did not see any spark. And I'm going to hook up this spark checker and see what we have. I pulled it 3 times, and 2 out of the 3 times it said no spark. The last time it showed it did have spark. Let's get a better ground on that spark plug and try it again. It's showing that I have spark. Now, if you've been following these videos, you may know that just because we have spark doesn't mean it's good timed spark. Let's see what this thing sounds like when we pull the cord. You notice how it wasn't just a dead pull. It kind of sounded like it had spark, or at least for the first few revolutions. And, you know, a coil failure isn't always just no spark. You could have timing issues or spark just for the first second or so. We've seen all this before. We've seen where on the auto-tune saws, a shorted kill switch wire might let it spark for a second and then not start. This is not an auto-tune saw. If that coil was, or that stop switch was shorted out, I don't think it would fire at all. So we're going to just swap out this coil and see if we can make it run with a new one. I already think that we had a good ground from the coil to the cylinder just because we had sparks sometimes. I probably should have checked it though. Well, there's your part number. Did you have a hard time reading that? It was a little blurry. Maybe there's a reason for that. Here's our kill wire, ground wire. It's on one of the screws of the coil. We'll get that started. And then our second screw. And we'll just take the slack out of these screws, and then we'll put the 0.3 millimeter gap gauge between the ignition coil and the magnets of the flywheel. We get the magnets lined up. It's going to pull the coil right up tight. And we just run the screws down. Yeah, sometimes you got to be a little careful that you don't run it down and it's twisting the coil and binding on one side and leaving a gap on the other. This blue wire, if you'll notice, there's a very sharp 90-degree bend. Actually, it's a 180-degree bend in that wire where the terminal is that pushes on the coil. If you have a kill switch that doesn't work, check the continuity in that blue wire, because that's a point where the wires tend to break a lot. Alright, the black plastic piece, that's called an air conductor if you're a Husqvarna fan. And there's a couple of grooves for the wires to push down into. This locates them so that they don't accidentally get drawn into the fan and get torn up. We're going to run our starter down on here. 4 screws that run into plastic. If you're using a power tool like this, make sure you got it set on a low setting and let the clutch hit, and then do the final torque by hand. We'll make sure that spark plug is drawn down tight. I couldn't remember if I had pulled it down yet or not. I'm feeling really good about this repair. Buzzing through it pretty fast. You know, I'm 5 minutes into this. I got a new coil in there. Let's see how it runs. It's not running. I mean, I know the engine was flooded because the last coil, you know, I had fuel coming out the muffler. So right now, the gears are turning. I didn't freeze the frame. That's just me thinking. And then I'm looking at this coil and a light bulb goes off. I don't know if you remember a while back, I did a video on a 450 Husky that was running backwards. It was running backwards because we had the wrong ignition coil in there. There's two different versions for the 450 saw. And guess what? There's two different coils for the 4 different versions of the 435 chainsaw. And when I looked up the number that I needed, I looked up the wrong model. So now we're bolting in the correct ignition coil. And the way to get around this, really, if you have the ability to look up the saw by the product number rather than just the model number, then you're most likely going to get the right part number. I must have been in a hurry, picked the wrong model number when I was looking for a schematic. You know, it was a 50-50 shot, but I got it wrong. So we're going to bolt the new one in here and see what happens. This is, you having deja vu because we just seen something exactly like this. Pushing the wires down into the groove on the air conductor, running the starter screws down. We're going to give this thing a try with the correct part number ignition coil. And if it starts and runs good, then that's all I'm going to have on the 435 Husky that wouldn't start because it needed an ignition coil. Thanks for watching. Later.